Hello, hello, everybody. Nice to be with you all. We're excited to be with you again. As you all know, Smart Building Collective, Smart Building Certification is founded in science, refined by practice, constantly optimized by our network of experts. And our partners and the solutions that are part of the ecosystem are part of that expert network. Today, we're going to be talking to Jan van Nordenne from Spectral. And Spectral is an incredible company. The smart building piece is one aspect of that company, but it does a lot more. Jan's going to give us a full introduction into it today. But really, it's about diving into their recent solution certification. So we certified the Spectral solution against the SBC framework. And yeah, it's a fascinating solution. So the SBC framework, to give you all a little bit of a reminder, is built up of a number of different modules. Building usage is all about how is the asset being utilized. Building performance is about how well does that asset perform. Energy, water, these types of things. And Spectral is really, their core focus is on energy optimization. So I think we're going to be spending a lot of time of the discussion there. Building environment is about health and well-being and how well is the environment suited for humans to use it. Safety and security is about how do we make sure that people are safe and secure, but also how do we tackle cybersecurity. And as we build more technology into buildings, cybersecurity becomes more and more of a topic area. And then user behavior and collaboration is how are people interacting with each other and how are they interacting with the building and what kind of technology are we putting in place to do these, to capture these. The solution certification, it's not just about a label of these solutions being accredited against the framework. It is that, but it's so much more. The demand came from building owners saying, hey, nice that you, through your smart building certification, have identified gaps in areas for our improvement, but how do we find solutions that make sense? And how do we find solutions that meet our needs? And so we launched the solution certification kind of at the beginning of 2022 to tackle that, to help people find proper solutions. And then it actually opened up a lot of room for other opportunities. So it's not just about, matchmaking to buildings. It is about that, but it is also about matchmaking to each other, because we believe that when solutions can create social cohesion with other solutions, then actually you can start to configure smart buildings before having those discussions after the fact. If a building buys a number of solutions and then says, hey, can you guys speak to each other? That's actually unfortunate, because then you have this kind of battle for territory and who's going to do what, and it's not as efficient as if we can do that beforehand. So that's really what we've been focusing a lot of our attention on, is how do we help solutions find each other. And we're happy with a number of different matches that have been made already, and we're just going to keep going and keep trying to add value and change the industry. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Jan onto stage, which I think he is already here, and we're going to get into it. Hey Jan, how are you?
Fine, how are you?
I am good. I'm good. I can't complain. It's busy. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's so many fascinating things going on in the industry right now. So it's nice to be with you and to just kind of dive into it. We really like these sessions because it takes very complex topics, complex solutions, and it kind of brings it down to layman's terms. What does it mean for the market? So we're excited to jump into Spectral with you. Shall we start first with who are you and who is Spectral? I think that's a good place to start.
Well, I'm Jan van Nordenne. My background is real estate. Used to work for a real estate company owner, role as a sustainability innovation manager, and before that, property manager. So over 10 years experience in the real estate domain. And within Spectral, I'm responsible for that's what's currently called the smart building platform. It's a real estate solution. And we're rebranding it to Brighter as we are rebuilding the product, basically giving it a new design. Yeah, and who is Spectral? I would say we're a startup with several startups, an ecosystem. Originally founded in 2015, really with the goal focus on speeding up the energy transition. So if you look at the solutions where that we have as Spectral as a whole, we steer wind farms, battery solutions for net balancing. If there's grid congestion, even then the grid operators ask us for a solution, because due to our technology, we can actually solve basically the grid congestion. Then we have the real estate part, the smart building platform, where basically we gather information through system integrations with all kinds of APIs. We visualize and analyze the data, and we have the possibility not only to give insights in the savings potential of a building, but we can actually take over control of a building through an intelligent model that constantly optimizes the building. They're optimizing comfort and saving a lot of energy, basically.
Yeah, brilliant. And you know, there's a lot of solutions out there these days that are, you know, AI, BMS optimization for energy and these types of things, which I think you guys fit into. But I think what makes you guys extra special or different is that knowledge of how it plays into a bigger picture, you know, about the community and about how it, you know, plays into the grid and renewable energy sources, these types of things. So I think that makes you guys very unique. So what we want to do today is we kind of want to go through the SBC framework and just talk about Spectral or talk about the smart building platform from each one of those perspectives. Because what we see with the SBC framework is that it actually allows different stakeholders to look at what we're doing from their perspective. And it's really important for us to try and simplify things for each of those different stakeholders. So for instance, building usage, right? It's all about how can we get a handle on how the asset is being used. And it was so interesting. I just put something out on LinkedIn about the latest Leaseman research that said that buildings are going to be used less and less because people aren't using them as much anymore. So it's kind of a critical moment for real estate owners to get a better handle on how that building's being used. So how does your guys' solution help that process?
It all starts with having data. And that's the starting point for everything. If you don't have data, you don't know what your baseline is. And how our solution helps is with gathering the data so you know where you're at, and really getting a grip on what's going on in the building by the integration with the building management system, the system that basically controls all the HVAC installations within the building, basically by being the layer on top of it, and adding additional information, and knowing how the building reacts with certain conditions, and then proactively act on future conditions. We get a grip on, I said, making the building run as efficient as it can be in the current state. And that, I think, is the most important, making sure that what's there is optimized for the max, and then look at, okay, based on data, it makes sense to replace a certain boiler for a heat pump, or do investments for actual replacement. But first, and that's where our model is critical, make sure that what's there is running perfectly.
should I see that as that you use occupancy data for those insights, or are you very much looking at the machines and how the systems are functioning and operating and how often?
Occupancy is a parameter, but that's more used as a validation for, hey, based on the initial inputs we got, a certain floor should be occupied, but we see based on the data that's there that it's not being occupied. Then we verify basically like, okay, is it empty? And then we can, if it's technically possible, also shut off a certain room. And then it's okay that a floor or a room gets under a certain temperature, because normally we want a good comfort. So we need to ignore then certain temperatures, because otherwise we'll start heating up the room. But our basic information we're getting actually from the building management system. Every data point we got real time. That's in the BMS. We have real time in our own environment, but added with additional layer to do the analysis and send information back. And the intelligence behind the model is that it makes decision based on the data we see. So normally in BMS, it operates like, okay, I have to be on at a certain moment in time. I go off at a certain moment in time, and it needs a certain temperature. And there's the amount of heat supply, the temperatures is determined based on outside temperature. But there's a lot of intelligence within the BMS, but it's very hard to have the settings right. And we can tweak it constantly. And our model knows at a certain moment that, okay, with this, certain outside temperatures, it takes an X amount of time to heat up the building. It will cool down at a certain amount of time. So meaning we can find the optimum moment to start heating up the building at as late as possible. But also, because we're very flexible in changing values, we can also constantly take the right temperature amount of heating the building, basically heating degrees the water that flows through the building. And that's just some examples, blocking the heat supply because the sun is going to shine. So the building doesn't overheat, and then you have to start cooling immediately. So there are all kinds of smart things within the model to make sure that you optimize for it. And like occupancy is a parameter that we check, but it's definitely not the main driver.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So, it's so, yeah, so the way we should be looking at the smart building structure from Spectral is that you are really driving the machinery and the optimization of the building based on the parameters of the weather and of different outsource aspects, and then your scheduling, of course, of when that space is planned to be used.
Yeah, you can see us basically as a car tuner. Like you have a good working car, but if you tune it, you get way more value out of your car than your originally is. But it's still the same car, and that's basically see us. We have a prerequisite. We need enough data coverage, meaning in a lot of cases we place additional sensors. But besides that, it's just we work with what's there, and that's what I think makes us so powerful. That you don't have to do all kinds of physical investments to make your building run more smoothly.
So what makes the difference between like a 1970s MG and a Formula One race car in the building sector? throw you on the spot
Yeah,
with that
yeah.
one.
This is a good one, because then I have to watch out, of course, to start talking before I have my thoughts in order. But that's not going to happen anyway. Like, let's see. Like, the Formula One car are the really new buildings that are very complex. But if you give a Formula One car to a child of 12, it's not gonna work, because they cannot handle it. You need someone who's trained to drive the car. And if you have an old car, probably a child of 12, especially when it's an automatic, can drive the car and come from A to B. And I think I'm actually on the good track here with a good comparison. So the Formula One car is a very good, technologically very sophisticated car. So there's nothing wrong with that, and that's with a lot of new buildings. In basis, there's nothing wrong with it, but there are only a very limited amount of people that can actually are trained to operate that car. And that's what you see, that there is a lot of the newer the building, the more complex the building, the more unnecessary usage there is, because it became too complex to have the settings set in a proper way in the BMS. And it's very hard with how BMSs are set up to, as a person, make it perfect. And then still you have the static settings you have to put in the system. And then you still don't have that dynamic adjustments that we are doing. So basically it's became so complex that you need systems like ours to operate it properly. And it's now not trained persons, but it's a trained system to have it operated.
Yeah.
So,
And I love the analogy, right? Because I think what we're seeing with the smart building certification is that we're starting to see actually more technology into buildings than is actually being able to be used. So I completely confirm what you're saying, that at a certain point it becomes overwhelming and too complicated to have one, single user be able to do it.
yeah.
And so, yeah, now I think we're getting into more of a fine tuning place of how do we find the right level of technology and functionality for the result. And I think that makes a nice bridge to the next module of building performance. So when you look at a really technical building or a less technical building, what are the building performance parameters that Spectral is going to help achieve? Like what are you actually optimizing? What are you making better?
Yeah, basically, our primary driver is steering on a good comfort level, basically indoor climate comfort, because it's important that the tenants, the people that are in the building, have as good as a comfort as possible, and currently, often there are no eyes on the building, so we don't know exactly what the temperatures are, and we say, okay, we steer within the ISO 74. That's clear that there are a certain bandwidth where you have to stay within. So that's very objective, also to measure, but and in that way, making it objective, measurable is already a big gain. And then, our model adjusts to stay as efficient as possible between those parameters. So, basically, that's it in a very simplified way.
Yeah, okay. So because that's actually the next module is building environment, but that's actually where you guys focus. You get your parameters set on what the proper indoor environment is based on the trends and based on what you're trying to do with your space. And then what is it actually doing from a performance perspective? Is it actually helping with energy consumption, or is it what's
Yeah,
the goal on that way?
yeah, it helps dramatically in most cases with energy consumption, and then mainly heating savings, because it constantly searches for the optimal way to stay within that comfort range. So it's and that's why I say the primary driver is comfort, and the result is energy savings. Because if you want energy savings, you just shut down all the installations, and you have a lot of energy savings, right? But then you have complaining tenants, and that's something we don't want. So the result is just a lot of energy savings, because basic settings are often not entirely correct, and a BMS is very difficult, capable of adjusting proactive on future events, basically, and constantly changing settings, because settings are now in most cases changed manually, and a human being cannot change 25 settings at once for a future event, and that's what we're constantly doing. So optimizing comfort, and this way really saving a lot of energy uses.
And what is an average savings energy-wise, would you say?
Currently, the average, and we can scientifically prove that, is that we have 24% on heating as an average, but the bandwidth is between 8 and 55%. And then the 8% is basically for an older, less complex building that is very closely monitored by like an installer or maintenance company. And the 55% is a very complex building.
Okay. So actually the older style building that is a little bit less technically put together is actually doing better energy-wise, I guess.
On average, yes. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And we've made it worse with the more complexity.
Yeah, because I did years ago, I did an analysis based on the energy labels. And I had a data set of, I think, 150, 160 buildings with where I did an analysis with the theoretical usage based on the energy label for a building and what it actually was. And there you saw the better the energy label, aka the newer the building, the more off the energy usage was, and that's quite common now. But it's just because it's so complex, and you see things with actually heating and cooling being on the same time, and it's just not picked up because there's so much data in the building management system that you need a model to gather the data, all give you insights, act on it. And just use the BMS environment as a reference to, if you know where the problem is, to actually dive into it, because that's the benefit of the BMS environment itself. It's more visual.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But I mean that's actually the opposite of the goal, right? Based on what you're talking about, this energy label being the opposite of the result being opposite of what it was supposed to do.
Yeah, but it's basically how you say it. It's the same with smart building certification, right? It's a starting point, and to give you a roadmap. Okay, what can I do to improve my building? And with an energy label, it's like, okay, my building is A label or A plus label, so it should be good. No. What we should start doing is looking at the actual performance of a building, and that's, a certain kilowatt hours per square meter per year, and also have the regulations based on that. What's the actual performance of the building? That's the only thing that matters, and not the theory behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what's so kind of, disheartening or challenging with all these labels and certifications and these things, is that if you give an A-rated energy label or a platinum smart building certification, there are people that kind of think, oh, okay, we're done. It's perfect. It works. I don't have to worry about it anymore. And actually, that's still where the work begins, because it's not about the technology in any way. It's what we do with it that actually is going to make the difference.
Yeah.
So would you say in these newer buildings and these older buildings, a system or Spectral or a system like Spectral is absolutely fundamentally necessary then?
Yeah, yeah. I hope that like every building with the BMS system in the entire world will use a system like ours, because we're not the only one that can do this properly, of course, but it's needed because of course, there are a lot of very good technicians that can manage BMS systems, but they're not enough. And this works way faster, way more
it's
dynamic.
Becoming more challenging. I think there's becoming less and less of them.
Yeah. So if we have systems like this operating the buildings, well, what I said, like on average, 24% on heating. That's like tremendous to have that. And the more sophisticated the model gets, because it's not like a model and we're done. We're constantly improving. The more buildings we have, the more we learn, the more data, the more we learn. So it will only improve. It's a necessity.
Yeah.
And how you say it? Every not used energy we don't have to get somewhere in a renewable way, right? So it's we're wasting a lot.
The best energy is the energy we're not using. Yeah.
Thank you. That was the one I was searching for. Yeah.
So is there kind of like aged buildings that don't need this then? You know, we were talking about the older buildings having less energy waste. They can be managed with a single technician or a team of technicians.
Yeah,
would you say that there's a line where we say buildings after this point should have that, or what's your view?
We currently approach it more from a way like, of course, finance is also important. So meaning investment versus potential savings. And there are currently, we say on average, if it's an office building above 2,000 square meters, there's like a good case that there's like a break-even point within 3 years. And then I'm not talking about who pays the bill and who gets the savings, just cost versus savings. Yeah. So it's more about the size of the building, and that will go down as we get more efficient. Of course, our pricing model will also go down. So I wouldn't say it's per se the age, but of course, having a BMS is a necessity. And our main focus currently is office buildings. We're going to do the first proof of concept with a hotel. But also really makes sense. But to answer your question, also all buildings still makes sense to do it, because there's always something to gain. Only what we see is the older the building, in most cases, less you can get.
Okay, and the bigger the building, the more the savings, I guess.
In absolute numbers, of course. Per square meter, that's not per se the case. It's more about how complex it is. Only the bigger the building, the more efficient the cases will be. Because if you look at the cost per square meter, they will go down the bigger the building is, because you need you always have like a base cost that you have to do anyway. So.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. And so, the next kind of module of the framework is safety and security, you know, and what we talk about is both physical and digital, talking about, you know, cybersecurity. And I don't think you guys are involved in the physical security space, but how are you guys tackling, you know, the digital security? Because, you know, as we digitize buildings, as it becomes more, you know, how are you guys tackling that, or what's your focus or your opinion on it?
Like with the connection with the building management system, we use physical devices that we place on location, where basically we use completely our own data lines, so to speak, which are of course secured. So in that way, making sure that it's as safe as possible. And also everywhere where we store the data, it's like it's all online. We use online servers basically in the cloud services, and there we use I said the usual suspects with servers on European soil, and where it comes with a large security layer basically. So. In that way, we pay a lot of attention to digital security, and we recently had what's called a pen test, basically a penetration test, where an external party did a forced breach, and we did very well. So that was very reassuring. So that's nice.
Very encouraging.
Yeah,
and you can also ask yourself, what we see in the smart building certification is, first of all, not all data is created equal, right? You have privacy data, which of course is very important to keep very, very secure and make sure that especially if you're collecting financial information and these types of things, that needs to be, locked down. But then you have less kind of sensitive data. If you talk about, occupancy or energy use or these types of things, it's just not as critical in keeping safe.
Yeah, and that's mainly, of course, the data we handle. It's from a privacy standpoint, it's not very sensitive. So in that way, that's one thing. The only thing, of course, theoretically, we are controlling a building. So if there's a breach there, someone can, do not fun stuff with the building. Only like it's often that there's remote access to building management system, because installers nowadays also, they won't go to location constantly. It's also all remote. So also there's not a direct, a large change in it. So,
Yeah, and then I guess the big users of energy might not want that news to go out. So that could be sensitive data as well. So, still on this building performance side of things, you say that a solution like Spectral is very needed for controlling BMSs these days. What is the BMS world doing with innovation and improving in order to offer this themselves?
Well, there are brands that have like an extension that is similar to what we do. So of course they also know like this is a necessity. So they're also entering this domain. There's one BMS brand that has the capability of really flexible setting all the settings, so that you can really, if you have the knowledge, can optimize the building, have a very flexible way of running the building, but it's still a lot of manual labor. But the BMS parties are entering this domain. Only mainly they do it for their own BMS. And if you look at an average client of ours, the larger portfolio, they have at least 3, 4, sometimes 7, 8 different kind of BMSs, meaning that would mean for them that they have to have a lot of different solutions, and now they have one platform basically that for some buildings is capable, the office buildings, to control it, and for all other kind of buildings you get at least energy data. So you have one solution that covered it all. One way of looking at the data, because that's the other thing. Every BMS has a different way of logging in, that kind of stuff, and now it's all tackled in one system. And on the other hand, you don't actually have to log in anymore for the BMS or the BMS data. You just want to see everything is running smoothly, and that's you can see in the platform, or we provide reports with what's going on in the building.
Multiple systems is multiple trainings, is multiple, humans need to use it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when it comes to our last module, which is user behavior and collaboration, and I mean that's the core modules. I guess Spectral does it help with the user experience and how people interact with the building? You know, what do you
Interact.
guys do if somebody's changing the energy? Is that possible? Changing
Yeah,
the
well,
heating?
it depends. When we get an assignment for a building, yeah, we ask like, okay, often there are like thermostats in rooms or parts of the building where you can adjust the temperature with, say, +3, -3. And it's up to our client to say, okay, we want that still to function basically, or we disable it. Now, in most cases, say like tenant is the most important. So if they want a +3 or a -3, we should be allowing them. So Spectral and the occupants of the building, there's no direct interaction basically. We try to make the comfort as good as possible for them and allow them still to change some settings. And only with, if there are climate complaints, if they occur, then of course we have a service desk to see what's going on, if it's a physical issue, etc., etc. And towards the future, we want to launch like an app just with, say, simple feedback where people can say like, okay, it's comfortable, or I would wish to have it a little bit warmer or colder, because all that data is also valuable to improve the way the model behaves on a certain building. But that's for now future material.
Well, and I really like that, you know, and the research is completely out right now. There's a lot of discussion happening of what level of control is the right level of control for users. You know, I think if you look back 3-4 years ago, it was about giving them everything in the app of turning on the lights, changing the temperature, you know, wayfinding, all of that stuff. And now I think the sentiment is starting to become more, actually the building should do that stuff for you, right? So I like where you're going with it, as let's capture the preferences, but not necessarily allow the control. And I think that's actually, I think the research over time is going to support that.
And from like, even like just from a technical perspective, and not me speaking as Spectral, but as someone who used to be a property manager for a long time, like the best buildings, tenants have no influence on the climate, because in basis, if it's designed and built well, it should run quite smoothly. Because what you often see when it's hot in the summer, people open the windows, but that is totally counter-effective. You feel wind, but you're actually pulling warmer air inside, so you screw up the system. And it's a logic reaction because you feel in control, you feel a breeze and it seems like it's colder, but by opening a window, you're screwing up quite a lot for the entire building because it goes out of balance. And a lot of those things are problematic. And that's, you should have as less control as possible. And even with the radiator thermostats, basically, often they're used, but they should be on the same value, like if a space is occupied, otherwise they should be turned off, of course. But on the same value throughout the year, because that's often what you see. Like people are like, oh, I'm cold, turn it up to 5, but the 5 represents a certain value, meaning it will start overheating, and that's even that little control, people like it, but it's not overall good for the building.
Yeah, a lot of buildings put in kind of the fake thermostat, right? Where people actually think that they've increased it, but it doesn't do anything.
But it helps. It actually helps.
Because it's that placebo effect, right? Where you think that it's actually solving your problem, but it's not. But I think it's a great solution in some ways. And we always say the smartest building should be one where a user kind of goes throughout their day, have a fantastic day, and end up at home being like, wow, I feel energized. I feel good. I feel like everything kind of worked for me today. and a sick building syndrome and badly managed energy and heat and that it wears on people to the point where that when they get home they're exhausted from it, right? So I think it's a really interesting discussion happening around it.
But there are so many aspects with comfortable buildings, because one is making sure that what's there is operating correctly, but then it's like, okay, most cases lighting is not controlled via a BMS, but sufficient and good lighting, that's a thing that has a tremendous effect. But even down to, is there sufficient cleaning? Because that's often you get complaints with dry eyes, especially when it's colder outside, the air becomes a bit drier also inside, meaning that all the dust in the room will float higher. But then it's like, the building is not good, or the HVAC system is not doing well. No, it's the indoor cleaning that is very important, and often we don't spend enough time on indoor cleaning. So it's the total that makes it good, and not the individual things. So
and I love so that much, because that's a perfect segue to our next thing, right? Because what we want to see is actually the least amount of technology for the maximum amount of impact in all of those different areas. And what holds all of that together is, of course, connectivity, but also integrative design. How do we get solutions to speak to each other, to move away from this siloed way of working, right? Where you have somebody working on energy consumption and you have somebody working on cleaning. Well, actually, there is overlap there. There is a way to kind of use technology for both. So what is your guys' philosophy on integrative design, and how do you guys partner with other companies? And I know you guys are steering BMS systems, so there's strong integration there already. But how do you guys see being part of that holistic perspective that you're talking about?
Now, in basis, we work towards becoming the platform within real estate, meaning we can provide value for all the different roles within real estate. That's quite a big goal.
That's a big goal.
If you want to do it all by yourself, it's not going to happen. And you want to make the value proposition as valuable for clients and potential clients as possible, meaning you need to work together, and that's the best. Together, you can get to a goal faster than if you try to do it all alone. So meaning we do have our own sensors that we place a lot, but we also have integrations with third parties because the sensors were already there. And then I don't want to say to a client or a potential client, we're going to place our own sensors. No, we integrate with third parties, and that makes sense because we'll encounter them more and more and more. It means the faster we can onboard more buildings and bring value and get that energy usage down. So my philosophy is that you need to work together and integrate with basically as many logic parties as possible. And especially, there are some that have so much knowledge in certain domains. Why try to invent the wheel yourself if you can partner up? So
and what we're seeing with the solution certification is that there's something that we call pure integrations, right? And there's something we call conflicted integrations. And conflicted integrations is a bit where you have overlapping functionality with the partner that you're potentially going to partner with. And it creates a bit of challenge and conflict because there's kind of this fight for territory and who's going to do what, and and the host party is always going to choose for their own functionality, of course, right? But what's more interested is this kind of pure integrations of finding parties that are 100% complementary with no kind of overlap, right? Where you can just work together. Do you guys see it the same way? I mean, I saw you shake your head a little bit.
Because we have quite a broad offering. If you look at getting the data, visualizing the data, and then also the control part, meaning we work together with quite a lot of parties where we have a lot of overlap. But in the end, it's you want to make you have a client, a joint client, and you want to make them be valuable for them in the most efficient way. Meaning that sometimes maybe you're complete competition in one trajectory, and the other time you work together to have that value proposition for a joint client. If I look at what we do, it's almost impossible to only work together with parties that where there's no overlap. And I don't think it's bad to also work together with parties and have basically exchange data where there's also an overlap in offering. That what I say, it's almost impossible with our solution. So.
Well, that's what we believe in as well from a collective perspective, is working together. So if you're a building owner, how do you go about that? What's the best way to think about multiple solutions together and capturing that kind of overview of your total solution, and how do you choose your partners? I mean, what would be your...
It's
a tough question.
Yeah, it's a tough question, but then I think I have to look back at my previous job, because then I was really searching, like I needed something, and it's just talking with a lot of parties, and it's like, okay, what's my goal for my portfolio, or what's my goal for a certain building, and then talk to the market and see what you think is the best fit. And like, I strongly believed in, I wanted like an umbrella platform that I don't have to log in to a lot of platforms, basically. So a one-stop shop, but maybe that's for other persons not the best fit. But it's just asking in the market, like, okay, this is my need. Which party seems to be a good fit? Have a conversation, and also what I think is also the part of choosing a solution, it's the person behind it, because
absolutely,
the solution can be good, but if the person behind it or managing a project is not the best fit, it still can be not.
And that's what, our solution certification is also not just about the technology, right? It's about the organization behind the technology. It's about the people. It's about the culture. It's about the ethos. What are they trying to do? What is their stance on these types of topics of, are we open to integrate? Are we closed? Are we open with our data? Do we want to make sure that everybody's looking at it together, or closed off and we'll just provide you the service? There's very big differences. And in the choice as a building owner, there's also pros and cons of working with those different types of situations, so it's not about right or wrong. It's about, preference and what works for you, and how can I, as an organization, get what I need out of it. So how do you see yourselves culturally, and how do you do it? What's your geographies? What's the partner ecosystem you think about? Tell us about your team.
If I look at my team, basically for Smart Building Platform / Brighter, we're at 22, 23 people, basically internationally. So we have a lot of people that move to the Netherlands to join Spectral, basically. One common thing, culture, is everyone is impact driven. They really are here because they see that we at least try to improve the world for the better. So I think that's a very common driver. From a partner perspective, we have several partners where we really try to cooperate with for rapid growth, but we're working together with really makes sense. That's expanding.
And which countries are you working in at the moment?
Currently,
where do you want to work?
Currently, officially, we're only operating still in the Netherlands. but we're preparing, and that's basically also an assignment already to move into Germany and Belgium for the first building. Also, really the building integration, so the control part. And several existing clients and potential clients. Then we're also looking at France, Austria, Poland, basically. But also there, we want to take it step by step, I have to say. So basically between now and 2-3 months, we'll be onboarding our first building in Germany and Belgium. So
because there is a bit of hands-on work that happens, right? The installation of a device. Is that something that you all have to do, or is that something that a client can
Depends.
do, or how should we look at that?
At the moment, basically, we do it ourselves, except for with one partner where they do it for us. But they're currently operating also in the Netherlands, but that really speeds up onboarding buildings, really the building integration part. But we're working towards going to more also of a reseller model, but at least third parties, enable third parties to do the installation, because we developed an application for that. So our sensors can already be installed by third parties, and then the gateway also. But there's still a lot of on-site hands-on checks that needs to be done currently, because to give a bit of a context, if you really start controlling a building, you may need to make sure that everything is in order, meaning we physically check the installations we want to steer, if they're functioning correctly, giving the right data to the BMS, because that's also a thing. And that's something we currently still do ourselves, but we're working towards, how you say it, based on data, having a way better list of things that we expect are wrong, that we can then hand over to an installer to check it. And then basically our goal is to next year that we don't have to go to a location anymore for installations and getting a building up and running, that it can completely be done by third parties, and then BMS at the time, because that will be a different work needed per BMS basically. So
and when I if I'm a building owner and I need to think about kind of the cost structure of something like this, how would I go about that? Is it expensive? Is it going to break the bank? Is it going to be reasonable?
It's all in context, but we work with the initial onboarding fee and then a SaaS recurring fee basically. And what we see is that in, let's call it 99% of the cases, if your building is 2,000, 2,500 square meters or larger, that your break-even point, cost versus savings, again, not saying who is paying and who is getting the savings, the break-even point is within 3 years. So, and the larger the building, the newer the building, the more savings there are, and the cost per square meter are lower. So that's basically how it works, and we're also flexible with initial and recurring to basically shift a bit in that.
And from a governance perspective, because you talk about that the pricing, it doesn't matter who, we're not talking about who's taking on the cost. That's just pure what it is. How are you seeing that? Is it sitting with the building owner most of the time, or is it with a tenant these days, or
it depends a bit on the client basically, but what I see in most cases is that the initial onboarding fee the owner is paying, and that the recurring is like service charges. And that's also, in my opinion, correct, because they're buying an application that lowers the energy
Their energy.
consumption,
Yeah.
and energy consumption in most cases is paid by the tenants. What you see with all our clients that are like, okay, we do want to make sure that there's like benefit for everyone, meaning that your cost should be lower than the savings. So say if it's a 3-year break-even point, then in year 1 our cost might be higher than the savings, and some clients then say like, okay, the surplus we also will pay, or put in the next year service charges, but really looking out for that it's an optimum case for everyone. So
yeah, amazing. Yeah, I think it's the industry is in discussion right now, right? Of where all this stuff sits and where it belongs and how to bill it through, and should the one who's getting the benefit pay the cost, because right now sometimes the cost is being asked to be paid by the one who's not necessarily getting the benefit, and I think it's just an interesting time that we're dealing with this. But I think it is starting to come out more and more, and I think what you just mentioned as a structure of, hey, I as a building owner am going to give you the functionality, but the functionality is for you, and you need to then manage it. I think that's a really reasonable way to look at it. Yeah. This has been great. I got a lot. I mean, we can continue to talk for hours about this stuff.
Yeah.
But I think, for all of our viewers, our listeners, if you're looking at your building optimization, your building performance, Spectral is a fantastic company to speak with, and their team is enthusiastic and eager. I guess it's a young team. Millennials and Generation Z, I guess.
I'm I said way above average age, I can say.
Because it's interesting, right? We just did an AP, our assessor program yesterday. We had a session and we talked about the generations, because we're building buildings. Who are we building them for? And then break down the kind of the characteristics of each of the generations. And the younger generations, man, it's all purpose. They're willing to be paid less for more purpose, and you see it. And you see it coming out in their work, and they're driven, and you see that at Spectral, which is really, really cool.
Indeed.
So for our viewers, just as a closing remark, what do you hope for them in the next year? What do you hope to achieve as well for yourselves for the next year?
Yeah, I really, what I hope is that our development goes on the page we want, and that we connect as many buildings as possible in a very efficient way, really for our control module to just get that unnecessary usage down and optimize for climate. So I really hope that in the coming months we land a lot of new clients with large portfolio where we prove what we can do and then expand within their portfolio. So because let's get that unnecessary usage down.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jan.
You're welcome.
We'll speak to you soon, and good luck.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.